Everyone quotes Sun Tzu. Almost no one has actually read him. Entrepreneurs put his lines on LinkedIn. Coaches use him to sell mindset courses. Generals reference him in press briefings. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every single one of them has missed the point. Because Sun Tzu was not a philosopher of victory, he was a philosopher of cost. In the book that everyone pretends to have read, it's not a manual for winning wars. It's a warning about how wars destroy the people who fight them. The art of war is not about fighting, it's about finance. To understand why, you have to step into the world Sun Tzu actually lived in, because his ideas didn't emerge from quiet meditation, they were forged in crisis. China, 5th to 6th century BCE. The spring and autumn period bleeding into the warring states era. The landscape is fractured, dozens of competing kingdoms, each one convinced it's destined to unify the world, each one draining its treasury to try. War here wasn't occasional, it was the default setting. Alliances formed on Monday and collapsed by Friday. Armies doubled in size every generation, shifting from small aristocratic chariot duels to massive infantry mobilizations that required grain, metal, horses, supply chains, and tax systems that no previous ruler had ever had to build. And here's the thing most people don't grasp about ancient warfare. It wasn't heroic, it was logistical. The moment an army left the capital, the meters started running. You needed wagons, grain, armorers, blacksmiths, cooks, porters. Every single one of them had to be fed or paid every single day, for however long the campaign lasted. A campaign of a few months could bankrupt a small state. A campaign lasting over a year could collapse a large one. And yet, because these kingdoms were trapped in an endless cycle of insecurity, they kept fighting anyway. It was an arms race before the term even existed, and it was tearing the entire political system apart. This is the world Sun Tzu walked into, not as a philosopher, not as a warrior poet, but as a strategist handed an economic crisis dressed up as a military problem. In the West, we romanticize him as some ancient CEO whisperer, but in reality he was closer to a risk manager. He looked at the numbers, the costs, the timelines, the supply lines, the rate of resource depletion, and reached a conclusion that no military thinker before him had ever dared to say out loud. The way these states are conducting war is going to destroy them, not because they'll lose, but because even when they win, they're losing. Most rulers believed their greatest threat was the enemy army across the field. Sun Tzu believed it was their own treasury. That's why the most important sentence in The Art of War appears on the very first page before he says a single word about tactics, terrain, or deception. He writes, "War is of vital importance to the state, not glorious, not honorable, vital, as in dangerous, as in capable of destroying the very society it's meant to protect." He spends the rest of the book explaining how to keep war short, controlled, and as financially contained as possible. Now go back and read his most famous quotes through this economic lens. Everything changes. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. That's not mysticism, that's cost avoidance. It's the ancient equivalent of achieving your strategic objective without burning capital. If you can win through diplomacy, psychological pressure, or sheer positioning, why would you pay for a battle? No nation has ever benefited from prolonged warfare. That's not a philosophical observation, that's a fiscal warning. Every additional day a campaign continues, it erodes the state's ability to function. Tax revenue collapses, farmers leave fields to serve as soldiers, supply chains stretch until they snap. He's describing economic death by 1,000 campaigns. Speed is the essence of war. Most people read this as aggression, strike fast, strike hard. But Sun Tzu's real point is subtler. Speed lowers cost. Every day an army spends marching, feeding, and waiting is money gone. Victory won quickly through timing and maneuver rather than prolonged attrition is victory that doesn't bankrupt you. Speed isn't about aggression, it's about financial discipline. When you read The Art of War as an economics text, the structure reveals itself immediately. Sun Tzu opens with 5 fundamental factors that determine the outcome of war: the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline. Sounds abstract, but strip away the language and what he's really doing is a cost assessment. How stable is your state? How resilient is your population? How efficiently can your army move? How disciplined is your administration? He's asking, what will this war actually require, and do you have it? His section on logistics is almost shocking in its specificity. He calculates how much grain is wasted when an army marches too far from home. He explains that transporting supplies drains the treasury faster than paying wages. He argues that wasteful commanders, the ones who win skirmishes but drain the national reserves, are more dangerous than enemy generals. For a military text, it is remarkably, almost obsessively, uninterested in battle. What it's interested in is what the battle costs. His treatment of intelligence follows the same logic. A single spy who prevents an entire army from marching in the wrong direction doesn't just save lives, he saves the entire budget of that campaign. Sun Tzu writes that what separates great generals from ordinary ones is foreknowledge, not courage, not strength, not even skill, information. Because information is the cheapest weapon available, and he was the first strategist to understand that misallocating information is exactly the same as misallocating capital. But his most sophisticated insight isn't any single quote or chapter. It's embedded in the structure of the entire book. Every line Sun Tzu writes is about opportunity cost. Every choice a ruler makes closes the door to a cheaper option. Fight a siege, and you've chosen to stop using diplomacy. Prolong a campaign, and you've chosen to pay the compounding cost of delay. Chase glory, and you've chosen to sacrifice the stability that keeps a kingdom functioning. Sun Tzu doesn't oppose war, he opposes waste, and the greatest waste in his framework is fighting battles you didn't need to fight. The general who wins without bloodshed isn't weak, he's efficient. The ruler who achieves his objectives by intimidation, alliance, and positioning isn't cowardly, he's solvent. And in one of his most revealing passages, he warns that rulers who enjoy warfare for its own sake will bring ruin to their kingdoms. Behind the elegant language is a cold accounting principle. If you treat war as a passion instead of a liability, you will eventually default. The kingdoms around Sun Tzu proved his theory in real time. The states that poured resources into drawn-out sieges drained their tax base, triggered internal rebellions, and collapsed, sometimes without ever losing a major battle. The states that applied his logic, rapid strikes, intelligence operations, strategic alliances, survived longer and consolidated power more efficiently. He wasn't just theoretically correct, history validated him. And then, history kept validating him, over and over again, across completely different centuries and civilizations. The Soviet Union in Afghanistan, the United States in Vietnam, Imperial Europe in World War I. None of these conflicts were lost because armies were weak. They were lost because the economic model behind them collapsed, supply chains broke, treasuries emptied, public support evaporated under the weight of costs no one had honestly calculated before the first shot was fired. Sun Tzu would have seen the pattern immediately. He'd seen it before, in a different century, on a different continent, but the same mistake, the same blindness, the same refusal to treat war as a financial decision before treating it as a military one. And here's where it gets genuinely strange, because the tools Sun Tzu championed have become the dominant tools of modern strategy, not because military thinkers are particularly well-read, but because these tools are cheaper. Cyberwarfare is Sun Tzu. You achieve maximum disruption at minimal cost without deploying a single soldier. Sanctions are Sun Tzu. You erode an opponent's economic foundation without firing a shot. Proxy conflicts, covert operations, strategic deterrence, information warfare, all of them are designed around the same principle: achieve the greatest possible effect with the smallest possible financial exposure. The world's most powerful states are still operating inside Sun Tzu's balance sheet, whether they acknowledge it or not. The deeper point, the one almost everyone misses, is this. Sun Tzu wasn't teaching rulers how to win wars, he was teaching them how not to destroy themselves while trying to win wars. States don't fail because they lose battles. States fail because they drain the capital that keeps them coherent, functional, and legitimate. Victory is meaningless if the treasury is empty when it's over. The best war is the one that doesn't require you to rebuild your economy afterward. That reframes everything. The Art of War is not a book about boldness, it's a book